I feel like I'm in a church or in an elevator. So quiet in here. We're all eager to get started, but it's one more minute to 1 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Delaware Public Service Commission meeting of May 22nd, 2018. I've got, do I have Jay in the room?
Yes.
Would you be kind enough to stand up? Jay, I would get up and come over and shake your hand and say congratulations on your upcoming retirement, but I guess I should stay here on the television. You have been a priceless person to me anyway, and I'm sure to the other commissioners, and so we're disappointed that you're retiring, but we're happy for you and your family. Jay has taken care of a lot of the planning and management of the budget and anything fiscal, and she's been very supportive of other members of the staff over the state of Delaware for approximately 20 years. So we want to extend to you a great big thank you for all of your work. We all much appreciate it, and we wish you best wishes for a very happy and joyful and healthy retirement. Thank you, ma'am. We have the reading of the meeting minutes of May 8th, 2018. Are there any changes or corrections to that, those meetings, minutes?
Move that we accept the minutes as presented. Seconded.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The consent agenda. There are three items on the consent agenda. Does any commissioner wish to take one of those items off the consent agenda?
I move to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The regular agenda, the first item is in the matter of the application of Delmarva Power and Light Company, etc., for a proposed order number 9221. Welcome to Delmarva Power, Mr. Goodman.
Thank you.
And Mr. Underwood,
Chair.
welcome to you as well, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Todd Goodman on behalf of Delmarva Power, Your Honor. And actually, before we get started, I know that along with Mr. Underwood, who Denrick serves as the chair of the EEAC, and Rob, Mr. Underwood, sorry, is sort of the guy who sits in the chair spot and has for years. But there are also some other folks here who were involved who may want to comment. So I just, if when we're done or during it, they could. I know that Charlie and John have worked really hard as members of the low-income, both the low-income committee, and also John was on the EAC itself. So anyway, this application, or it's really a letter application, concerns one of the merger commitments, where in the settlement agreement, it was paragraph 17, Exelon and Delmarva pledged to give $2 million for low-income energy efficiency programs, and they required that they would be recommended by the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council of the state, and then once the program is recommended, it would come to the commission for approval. And then we had a little thing called a most favored nations clause, which you all will remember, that added some more benefits towards the end. And that raised that total amount to $4 million, which is very nice and kind of a unique thing for Delaware to have that come about. So the EEAC established a low-income committee to help put together a plan on the best way to spend this money to make sure they get good and needed programs. And it was about a year-long process for the low-income committee, and they came up with this low-income distribution plan. The EEAC reviewed it and unanimously voted to recommend it to this commission. And just in general, it's proposing a very detailed process to select the best, not only to select the best programs for low-income residents, but also sort of a unique feature is it's going to attempt to put in place to manage it a charitable organization that actually is good at increasing the funds. So hopefully it will be more than just $4 million, and maybe even it could keep going over time, and that's pretty exciting. And I thought really interesting feature that they've worked into this. So there'll first be a competitive RFP to find a good funds manager and program manager. And then after that, there'll be a series of RFPs to pick the best programs. Again, the EEAC, through the recommendation of the low-income subcommittee, believe that it's through competition that you'll get to see the most creative opportunities and can select from the best. And if there aren't enough good ones, they'll continue looking. It's not going to be an automatic giveaway of the money. Delmarva is going to manage the first request for proposal to find a foundation or charitable money manager. There'll be a whole committee looking at that, which will include representatives, hopefully from the DPA and the commission staff. Once there's a manager appointed, we'll get into the process of starting to look for the appropriate programs. There will be a very thorough, what we call EM&V, which is basically a process by which there's measurement and verification of each of these programs that's actually bringing the benefits that it's supposed to bring. The manager will be responsible for tracking progress of all the programs and doing the actually verification to make sure that these programs are doing what they're supposed to be doing. The manager will present annually to the EEAC, and your staff actually added a couple more requests to this that everyone has agreed to, and they're good ones. Number one is that the manager will also present the annual report that the manager will have to give to the EEAC, will present it to your honors as well. And I think that was a really good add by your staff. And then also, I think another good one, which everyone has agreed to, is that your staff wanted to make sure that there was some sort of recourse if they believed that maybe this money wasn't being used appropriately for low-income energy efficiency programs. And so the staff wanted to be able to first bring that to the EEAC itself and have them review it. And if they couldn't get a resolution or a correction there, they could also bring it to the commission. And that was agreed to by the parties in the EEAC. So your staff also did a very nice job on a proposed draft order, and we've all reviewed it, and I'll speak for Delmarva that we support it, and we ask you to go ahead and approve this process so we can, as I say, get busy trying to help the people that need these funds.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Mr. Willard?
Oh, yes, everything that Mr. Goodman said, the staff agrees with. As he spoke about what staff added, and the staff agreed to support the program put together by Delmarva and with the EEAC, but they really wanted to make sure that appeal process to the commission and to the EEAC would be part of that. And that, like Todd said, the parties have agreed to that. And so the staff recommends also that you approve Order 9221.
Thank you, Mr. Willard. Ms. Iori?
The public advocate has nothing to add to what's already been said.
Mr. Underwood?
Chair Winslow, Commissioners, thank you. We also support that. The Energy Efficiency Advisory Council has vetted this, the Low Income Committee has vetted this, and we are fully in support of the docket as brought in front of the commission with the changes as per the advocate and staff.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. Is there somebody else in the audience that wishes to make a few short comments on this, or are we? Would you please come forward and have a seat and relax and give us your name so we have it for the record, and give us a little bit of information about this matter.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is John Sykes, S-Y-K-E-S. I was one of the original members of the EEAC representing the low-income world. Personally, I have been involved in a nonprofit volunteer basis working low-income energy savings for about 5 years in Wilmington. So we have a lot of experience working in that environment, both with the low-income folks and with energy efficiency. I have been trained as a analyst and so I have a pretty good sense as to how audits work and how energy efficiency works. When we brought this program to the Low-Income Advisory Committee, the one that you have in front of you, it made a lot of sense to get the low-income community involved in the work that we were doing, because for those of you who have worked in that space, that it's hard to come in from the outside and bring a new program in and get a high level of adoption or even a low level of adoption. So what this program does, and the way it's been put together, is to really get the community involved in the front end and also making decisions for that. So we see it as a big benefit, and not only to help the programs that come through this, the projects that come through this, but as it's part of the broader EEAC, we see these projects helping to lift up the other ones that are coming from EEAC. So we see this as a win-win-win all the way around.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes.
Charles Kistler, K-I-S-T-L-E-R. So I'm currently the executive director of a nonprofit called the Help Initiative. Previously was the program manager for a CAP agency within the state of Delaware. So I managed the weatherization program, managed the heating repair and replacement program, managed the summer cooling program, and managed the community energy center program. So I have a real good sense of the low income requirements and the distribution of low income throughout each of the 3 counties within the state. One of the things that we didn't talk to in any great detail was the way the RFP process is structured. It will be broken down into 2 different areas. One, large scale or statewide type initiative, and another one for community-based initiatives. John and I have our heart in the community-based initiatives because that's where the smaller, more subject matter expertise is for people that live in those communities, and finding a way for those people to be able to use this program and this funding to be able to create something that's sustainable and that does some real good and measured impact to the communities that they represent. Over the course of the year and a half or so that we've been involved in this, it's been really it's been enlightening for us because we take programs like the Lights on Dover Strong program, and I don't know if anybody's exposed to that, but taking a simple LED light bulb and going porch to porch and putting those lights on, and they automatically go on at night because they have a sensor device built into them. So at night the lights go on all the porches, and in the back we put a solar-powered floodlight. Very, very simple concept, but it has successfully moved the concentrated areas of criminal activity from real key streets in this city. And we plan to do that in other cities, including tonight we go to a public session similar to this one in front of the City Council of the City of Seaford. So we'll do that there. So the whole intent is to try and move the evolutionary process of this kind of funding and these kind of programs to do real good that's measured. And that man makes sure that it gets measured. So the whole EM&V process that was really embedded into us is a key part of what we're trying to do. So it's not just a matter of burning money down, like Todd said. Basically we want to do is continue to perpetuate this funding and be able to see some real measured good. And if we have to do it in a pilot small version, measure it, validate it, and then exponentially grow it, that's what we plan to do. So we're excited. We're also very privileged to work in this space, John and I. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kistler and Mr. Sykes. Very much appreciate your comments. Thank you for coming in, and thank you for all your volunteer work, and obviously best wishes. Commissioners.
My question is for Pam Knotts, Ms. Knotts, who prepared the memorandum. And I did have some questions that you answered for me, but another question I had was the advisory committee that was created under the EEAC set up to examine 4 areas, and one of them was the gaps in the existing low-income programs. Was the task to identify those gaps, or is the understanding that through the RFP process, the professionals and the grant-making, I guess, charity that is ultimately granted through the RFP process going to be the ones that are identifying those gaps?
And some of my colleagues may wish to also comment on this, but the gaps were identified so that in order to prevent duplicity of programs that are already in existence, so that they kind of knew like where, first of all, geographically, where is the population for low income, and then what are the gaps in some of the programs, and how could we maybe meet those gaps? And hopefully, through the RFP process, that those gaps then would be, programs would be implemented that would fulfill those gaps. But the gaps were identified so that we would know about duplicity of programs.
And I have to commend everybody who's been involved in this, because to go through this process and determine that a professional organization was going to be ultimately in charge of not just distributing funds, but developing, like you had said, matching fund potential programs, and is really taking $4 million and really it's unlimited. So I commend you all on that work. Thank you.
Mr. Correa.
I like both the ideas and the concepts you have included in the program. One is the reporting, which I think is a very good idea, and also the appeal process, because many times in a community, a few times in community, things go out of line or what have you, so that appeal process will bring it back on the line and what have you. One question I have for you is that once the funds are distributed, are you planning to put a fiscal year limitation on that? For example only, that they will have to spend the money by the end of fiscal year 2019, or can go on to 2020, 2021, like perpetuity you mentioned in your presentation. So do you have like an idea whether you will put such a limitation or you will not?
Yeah, first, I forgot to introduce my client, the most important man in the room as far as I'm concerned. And I think most of you know him, but this is Glenn Moore. He's the vice president of our Northern Delmarva region. He's also Delmarva's representative on the EEAC, and he was really, in my opinion, even though I'm his lawyer, critical of putting this together with Rob and the team. So can you answer that, Glenn?
So I think there's a couple components to it. There's $4 million available. What we're going to do is we're going to allot a number probably around $2 million that the fund manager can give out in grants. Probably $1.5 million to the large that was discussed. The grant's probably above $100,000, and $500,000 to the smaller grant. That way they can continue to grow the other money, and we can determine whether these programs are working, whether that mix between large or small is the right mix. And we will get reporting from them to determine how those programs are going. Should we move the money? We hope to get additional money in through the fund manager. That's the concept that John Sykes came up with many moons ago. But the idea would be that we would give those monies. They could come back in for re-grants if they so determine. But it will be doled out a little bit over time so that we can learn from it and make sure those allocations are the appropriate allocations.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my compliments to everyone who's invested the energy and the time to come forward with this proposal. I also like the quality of life benefits that were mentioned by testimony from one of the previous speakers. I have a couple of questions. When I look at the low income population, and I look also at the demographics of the reporting, it's pretty clear that many of them live in rental properties. And one concern I have is how will the program ensure that the efficiencies, hence monetary benefits, flow through the landlords to low-income renters?
Great question, Commissioner Gray, and to be very frank with the commissioners, that's going to be a huge challenge. It always is with the low-income programs, but before any funds will be expended to rental properties, there will have to be an agreement that the benefits will go to the person who's renting the property, the person who's living in the property, and it's not just part of a extra money for the property owner. So that will be part of the program designed to ensure that that's in place.
So there's an oversight function associated with the administration and delivery of the program?
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
So that leads me to another question. Mr. Moore, you mentioned, I think, 3 or 4 segments of how the $4 million will be distributed. But typically with these programs, there's always an administrative cost. And I'm always concerned, is there a guiding principle that says that the administrative cost for this program will not exceed a certain percentage of the $4 million?
So I think 2 things. One is on the RFP itself, that question is asked and will have to be responded to is what are the administration costs? Where do the administration costs come from? In other words, an agency could not take it necessarily out of the $4 million, they could take it out of investment income. So we're going to ask not only how much do you expect, we're going to ask where that money comes from. In other words, does it come out of the $4 million? Does it come out of additional dollars raised? Does it come out of investment of the $4 million? I believe, now you're going to test me a little bit, I believe there is a cap in the RFP of 5%, but I'd have to double check. It's been a while since I think there's a cap in how much can be done on the administration cost.
It would be ideal if there were a guiding principle and a threshold above which you would consider putting limitations on how much gets spent for administration as opposed to accrues for the programs.
And we would really like to see that not come out of the original $4 million, so that all $4 million, understanding there is administration costs, but we would love to see the fund manager, I'm giving away if any fund managers are listening, we would really like to see that in additional dollars or out of the interest that they could obtain through investing the $4 million before it's obviously granted out.
Okay.
That's part of the RFP.
And, Mr. Chair, I have only one last question. As I look at the order as it's constructed, and I look at section, well, it basically, the section I'm reading says, a grant application review committee will be formed from members of the LI Advisory Committee and may include representatives from DPA and Public Service Commission. I guess I raise the question, should it be may or should it be will?
I'll let staff for the advocate comment first on that. I'll let Pam comment on that first.
Commissioner Gray, I guess since staff and the DPA is not actually part of the EEAC in and of itself, it's not neither one of those are voting members. We only work in collaboration with the EEAC. The EEAC has graciously invited staff and the DPA to become so-called quasi-voting members for the application review committee for the RFP. So please correct me if I misstated anything.
That is correct.
I think the shall is dependent on where the advocate and the staff would like to be.
Okay.
In other words, if you put shall, they would physically have to put a member on. I think we're allowing that to be a decision of the advocate's office and the staff.
Okay. So it's not
They're gonna be offered, I think, with limited staff, they'll have to make a determination of whether they want to be on.
okay. It's not a constraint, it's a discretionary opportunity.
That's how
Okay.
we see it.
All right, very good. No further questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, everyone.
Mr. Slater?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Where does the $4 million, I actually don't remember the answer to this question. Where does the $4 million go if you don't spend it in time? Because if we put $2 million out and the time runs out, then that money's gonna go to some other resource, renewable energy or something. And I actually cannot remember the answer, but I know it's not, I know it doesn't stay in the same pot of money.
Yeah, there is a time frame where if it's not all spent, now when I say the 2 pots of money, hopefully that's only 6 months, 9 months, or a year. You know, hopefully these grants are coming in and going believe there is a time constraint, that if the $4 million is not spent at a certain time, it goes back somewhere, but I have to look. Do you remember?
No, I don't, but I also know that there is an EM&V process that's going to be developed, and while that's primarily for measuring and verifying, there's still, part of the reason that an RFP is being done is to build on ideas and bring in new things. So there will definitely be some sort of restriction. We want the money spent. We want it used. We don't want it sitting around. And as you've all heard, and I know that a couple of you have commented on it positively, is the goal is that the money isn't going to run out, right? We're going to be able to keep growing it through a charitable manager. So
If I could add one thing, we need to get there is an exact answer to that. The original $4 million must go to Delmarva Power customers. The committee is determining if additional funds are raised, that money theoretically could go to Delmarva and non-Delmarva customers, because it's not physics. So we will keep track of the $4 million. If there's additional monies raised, the fund manager will have to make a recommendation that will come back to the EAC as to how you split that money up. So theoretically, it could help non-Delmarva.
Connie?
It goes back to the arrearage program.
There you go. That's the answer.
It's 5 years.
And we're on what? And what year are we on?
Part two.
Okay.
The merger was approved 2 years ago. I'm sorry, closed 2 years ago in March. So we're a little over 2 years.
Okay.
So we have to spend it in 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, my overarching point, if I may, was just that the $4 million has to be spent, otherwise it's going to go to a different program. And so I didn't want to see the money held here and then the RFP 6 months. And I just want to make sure the $4 million is spent.
And one point of clarification, I think I heard you say that the money is designed to go to low-income Delmarva customers, but I think it's Delmarva customers in Delaware?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Delaware's the only one we don't care.
My responsibility. Yeah, Delmarva, Delaware customers.
I think that Mr. Slater brought up a good point, and my recollection is that the commission has retained the authority to make changes in that order. So if something is necessary along those lines, then obviously the party should let us know. Because I think everybody wants the money to be spent on the low-income people, as stated and as agreed to. Yes, go ahead. Make a motion.
Move we approve order number 9221 as presented.
Second the motion?
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Number 2 is in the matter of the application of Delmarva Power and Light for approval of energy efficiency programs for electric customers and rate recovery mechanism. We're going to consider proposed order number 9222. And I think Mr. Walsh is going to carry the ball on this one.
No.
No, I apologize, Mr. Willard.
Yeah. Again, this has been going on for quite a while now. Delmarva has proposed these energy efficiency programs. There's a consumer products program and a behavior-based program. And we've been looking at all this, and we've just realized it's a little bit more complicated than we anticipated it was going to be. And so today's order number 9222 is to name Glenn Kenton as the new hearing examiner and have him agree on a procedural schedule and hearing dates, and then, of course, report back to the commission with his findings on this. And so therefore, we just ask the commission to go ahead and approve this order number 9222 that does that.
Thank you, Mr. Willard. Mr. Goodman?
No, I think, I'm actually I was very happy to hear that Mr. Kenton was selected. He's in addition to being a good person, you all recognize him from being in here, so he understands utility issues. And I think it was a really good creative way to keep the docket moving. I know with only having one hearing examiner now, it's not easy. So I'm very pleased, Mr. Kenton.
Ms. Iori?
No objection.
Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Chair, I move that the commission adopt order number 9222 as submitted.
I second it.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you all. Number 3 is in the matter of the Delaware Public Service Commission staff to establish regulations for certifying new electric transmission utilities in the state of Delaware. Proposed order number 9223. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Chair Winslow, Commissioners. This, by background, we filed this petition for approval of proposed order 9223 to approve the proposed regulations as final and directing the Commission Secretary to publish the final proposed regs and register regulations. By way of background, I think it's important in this, at this procedural posture. On February 14th, 2018, House Bill 127 was enacted into law, and it updates Title 26 by adding Section 203E, which codifies the requirements for obtaining the CPCN, or the requirements for obtaining and the impacts of having obtained CPCN to operate as a new electric transmission utility in Delaware. I also want to add some language from the original synopsis, which I think helps illustrate the importance of this matter, these regulations, and the addition of Section 203E. The General Assembly's synopsis states House Bill 127 updates Title 26 regarding the requirements for obtaining certificate to operate in Delaware as a new electric transmission utility. The bill uses language similar to certificates for water, wastewater, and other services under PSC jurisdiction. Due to recent changes in federal law, certain projects will now be available to entities both in and out of state. In order to perform this type of work in Delaware, a company will need to obtain a CPCN from the Commission. Currently, there are no qualifications defined for the PSC to assess the impact a project of this nature will have on Delaware and citizens. This bill will provide PSC with the necessary authority to assess that impact and, if necessary, revoke a certificate in the future for good cause. So, House Bill 127 creates, as I mentioned, 203E, and that is a capital E, which gives the Commission authority to evaluate these CPCNs and also to promulgate regulations prescribing the form of the CPCN application as well as the criteria for evaluating and establishing terms. So in furtherance of the Commission's responsibilities to carry out those duties, we, on March 6th of this year, filed a petition to establish certification requirements. And on March 22nd, this Commission approved Order 9193, which granted staff's petition, opened this docket, ordered the publishing of the preliminary regulations, which I will refer to as proposed Reg 3011, and also requested public comments with the Commission-approved notice through April 30th of 2018. And as directed, Reg 3011 was published in the April Register of Regulations. Only one comment was received, and that was from Northeast Transmission Development, LLC, which I'll refer to as NTD, and I know Mr. Nutter, NTD's counsel, is here. NTD had 3 comments, and for efficiency, I'll address the comment staff's assessment of that comment and how we have reflected that in the proposed order. First comment was concerning the inclusion of business day in Reg 3011. NTD suggested that business day was not consistent with the General Assembly's intent as codified in 203E, and that the General Assembly had a clear construction and meaning as to days, meaning calendar days. Staff agrees with that, and proposed order 9223, which we're asking the commission to approve today, attaches the final proposed regulations, which deletes both the definition and the reference to business days in section 2.2.28. Instead just uses 90 days, both as to the amount of time for the commission to consider or to issue a decision on the application, and there's a provision which allows the commission to add an additional 90 days, which is similar to the water and the wastewater CBCNs. So that is consistent with what is done with the other CPCNs. And again, that's reflected in the attached order 9223. Next comment from NTD was that, as originally proposed, Reg 3011 included a third potential basis for determining good cause to revoke an electric transmission CPCN. And that was specifically a finding by PSC that the CPCN is resulting in material adverse, results in material adverse conditions on state's economy, ratepayers' health, safety, or welfare. And NTD pointed out, as with business days, that was not part of the General Assembly's intent in the 203E, and that is not how good cause has been determined as to the other CPCNs. There were only two bases there, and we believe that that is consistent, and accordingly we have in the proposed order removed that third basis, and we leave the two bases as appear in the water and wastewater CPCNs. The last comment from NTD involved the required disclosures of the applicant. And as originally proposed, 3011 included the disclosure of, and I'll quote, violations of a state's laws, rules, or regulations. And that is in section 2.2.18.1.2. And NTD asserted that it was overly broad due to the multitude of state laws, rules, regulations, and considering the applicant and its affiliates. And in fact, that could require disclosure of a notice of a violation or a finding of a violation of, for example, a land use statute or an employment statute that had nothing to do with its ability to provide safe, adequate, and reliable service. Again, a good point. We agree with that, and that is also consistent with the other CPCNs. So proposed order 9223 revises that section to state, and I quote, "been found to be in violation of a state's laws, rules, or regulations related to the provision of electric transmission service." Our proposed order 9223 attaches as Exhibit A the Reg 3011, which I've called the final, or the proposed final regulations. And importantly, we believe that these are substantive changes, and they're therefore not subject to the notice requirements under the APA under section 101.15. The determination of substantive, 101.18C states whether change constitutes substantive or non-substantive shall be determined by the agency head. And I've discussed that with the acting executive director, Mr. Hardigan, and I would submit that this is not even close to substantive for the following. The changes only affect administrative procedural safeguards. They modify them to be more consistent with the other CPCNs, that it creates no advantage or disadvantage to either side. It's merely honing them to be consistent and gives the commission all the authority it needs to carry out provisions of the CPCN application. And the modifications don't adversely impact the applicant's ability to file an application for CPCN. There's no adverse impact on the commission's ability to evaluate. For example, if good cause are found to revoke the CPCN. And it does not create any substantive change to the rights, obligations, and duties to the applicant which obtains a CPCN. So in that regard, there's nothing substantive here. This is, I suppose an analogy would be we put the correct button on the suit that the General Assembly had intended, and there was no need to have the cuffs down to here. The General Assembly said they should be here, so we did. And we made those changes, but it's still a tuxedo. It's not, we didn't change it into a business casual jacket. And not changing it in that regard, the applicant for that CPCN or tuxedo can obtain the same exact thing, obtain the same rights, obligations, and duties, and that is what is really the substance, and we haven't changed that. So I would submit that those are non-substantive changes and would therefore request the Commission's approval of Order 9233, which would, or 922, 9233.
No.
9223.
Right, 9223, I got it. Approving the publication of Reg 53, almost said 56, that was a bad thing, 3011,
Yeah.
which is attached to the proposed order as Exhibit A, and includes the changes that I just referenced, and again, not requiring any notice of requirements under 101.15.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Nutter, you're not up here at the table. Oh, you are close to the table. Any comments? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair? Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. James Nutter with Parkowski, Gerken, Swayze, and good afternoon, fellow commissioners. Representing Northeast Transmission Development, I'm sure it's no surprise that they were a commenter given their selection as the designated entity to build the transmission line from the artificial island complex to Delaware, and all the proceedings that have been, the commission has been receiving continual briefing about for the past several years. House Bill 127 that passed was started by Commissioner Howard, I think about 4 years ago, and did finally pass in February. It's something that Northeast Transmission Development participated in the drafting and the work in the legislature to assure that it did pass. We're satisfied with the regulations that are now proposed are consistent with the statute, and we ask that the commission approve them. I do have to apologize to Mr. Walsh, because I did notice one or two date errors that need to be changed in the order. I just noticed those now and did not give them a heads up about it before. But in the "and now" clause, the date should be changed to May, or today's date in the order. On the first page, on the final whereas clause, I think that should reflect the March 13th, 2018 date, if that's correct. And then in paragraph 1 of the order itself, commission order that opened the docket, it was 9193. And I had not noticed those before. But I'm happy to answer any questions that commissioners have as to the changes, but I trust that you read the comments, and we'll be brief if the commission has no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nutter. Any commissioner have any question of Mr. Nutter?
One question about your revised dates, where you have the last whereas on page 1. Is that year 2015?
No, I believe that should be 2018.
So it should be what date again in that line?
I believe that's the day the commission met, was the March 13, 2018.
2018.
Commissioner Gray, yes.
Commissioner, that is correct.
Mr. Chair, I move that the commission adopt order number 9223 as edited.
Second the motion.
Ms. Iori, do you have any comments to make on the motion?
We do not.
Oh, no, not the motion, but okay.
We do not.
Okay, thank you.
Saving them for next time.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion made? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries with the 3 changes noted.
Chair, we will make those changes, and I apologize for that oversight. That was, just as an aside, that particular morning was a little unusually hectic for both Mr. DeLosa and myself, and I told Mr. DeLosa that I would not point out this fact, but I will anyway. In his memo that he mentioned regulations for certifying new electronic transmission utilities. So I just said, Joe, I know you're leaving, but we're still dealing with electric and not electronic. So that would be my only dig. Other than that, we know his regulatory acumen is superior.
I would agree. Okay, the next, thank you, Mr. Nutter. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to make any comment to the Public Service Commission? I don't see anybody approaching the table or the podium. We have, I guess I maybe did that a little bit early. We should probably do the application of Chesapeake Utilities. Mr. O'Brien probably is expecting to speak at some point in time. Is he here, Mr. O'Brien? It's always welcome, Mr. O'Brien. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. I'm Bill O'Brien. I'm Associate General Counsel with Chesapeake Utilities Corporation. This is the hearing in PSC docket number 17-1021, which is the Chesapeake's annual GSR application. The company has with it today Matthew Evergam, Manager of Pricing and Regulatory Affairs, and we also have in the audience William Chris, who is Manager of Gas Supply and Transportation Services. They are here this afternoon to help answer any questions that the commissioners might have. So notice of this hearing was published in the Delaware State News on April 13th, in the News Journal newspaper on April 17th, and of course it was noticed when the agenda for today's meeting was posted on May 15th. As a preliminary matter, the company would respectfully request that Chair Winslow mark for identification and admit into the record the 8 exhibits that are listed on the exhibit log that was provided to the commission prior to the hearing.
Is there any objection from any of the parties with respect to that request?
No
No.
objection.
And they are admitted.
And just for the record, I'll go ahead and go through those quickly. Exhibit number 1 consists of the affidavits of publication of notice for today's hearing, as well as the affidavits of publication of notice, which notice the filing of the application. Exhibit 2 is the application itself that was filed on September 1st, 2017. Exhibit 3 is the pre-filed written direct testimony of Matthew Evergam, which was filed with the application. Exhibit 4 is the pre-filed direct testimony of William Chris, which was also filed with the application. Exhibit 5 from staff is the direct testimony of staff witness Jason R. Smith, which was submitted on February 22nd, 2018. Exhibit 6 is the pre-filed written direct testimony of Jerome D. Mierzwa, the witness for staff and DPA, which was submitted on February 28th. Exhibit 7, the written rebuttal testimony of Christopher Redd for the company, dated April 6, 2018. And Exhibit 8, the rebuttal testimony of William Chris for the company, dated April 6, 2018. And thank you for admitting those exhibits. Okay. So as the commission could probably tell from the proposed order today, the parties have reached an agreement on all the issues, and that those agreements are reflected in the proposed order, and I'll go through those very quickly. First, all the parties have agreed to recommend approval of the GSR rates and the balancing rates charged to transportation service customers as filed with the original application. Second, the company has agreed to continue certain identified provisions of prior settlement agreements. Those provisions are laid out in paragraph 15 in the proposed order. Those provisions generally have to do with the type of information that the company is required to file with the GSR application, as well as information that we're required to provide to DPA and staff between GSR applications. Third, the company has agreed to propose in its next GSR application transportation service balancing charges that are consistent with the approach that Mr. Mierzwa recommended in his testimony. And that is also laid out in the proposed order. Fourth, staff and DPA agreed that the company's design day projections and capacity resources, as reflected in its 2017-2018 gas supply plan for the 2018-2019 winter season, are reasonable, including the proposed retirement of the Queen Street propane air facility. And fifth, staff and DPA indicated their agreement with the company's proposed tariff revision, which allows it to make out-of-cycle GSR adjustments whenever its over or under collection exceeds 3%. So what that means is between GSR applications, if the over or under collection exceeds 3% of total costs, then we can come in and make an adjustment in order to help manage that over under collection. The existing tariff already has a requirement in it for the company to come in and make an adjustment to its GSR between applications if the over collection exceeds 4.5% or the under collection exceeds 6%. That requirement remains in the tariff. The proposed revision just adds an option for the company to make another similar adjustment. That wraps up my summary of the agreement. And after the other parties have a chance to present, we will be asking you to adopt proposed order number 9218, which would adopt those terms that I just laid out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Mr. Willard.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. O'Brien, everything he said we agree with. Back in September, the commission allowed these rates to become effective, subject for refund. This evidentiary hearing on that, Mr. Mierzwa made various recommendations, and eventually staff and the DPA reached agreement with Delmarva on these matters. And I would like Mr. Jason Smith to testify about this, if I may.
You mean Chesapeake?
You mean Chesapeake?
I'm sorry, yes. What did I say, Delmora? Yeah, I'm sorry, Chesapeake.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, for the record, sir, what is your name again?
My name is Jason Smith.
And your current employer and your position?
I'm a Public Utility Analyst 3 at the Delaware Public Service Commission.
Were you the case manager on behalf of the staff with this docket?
Yes, I was.
As part of your duties as the case manager for this matter, did you on February 28th, 2018, file testimony on behalf of the commission in this docket, which has now been entered into evidence as Exhibit 5?
Yes, I did.
Did you prepare this testimony yourself?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to your testimony, any modifications or corrections in order to ensure that they're true and correct and accurate as of today?
I have no changes.
If I were to ask you the same questions contained in your pre-filed testimony as Exhibit 5, would your testimony be the same as it was?
Yes, it would.
All right. And do you adopt your pre-filed testimony marked as Exhibit 5 as your testimony for the hearing today?
Yes, I do.
Okay, did the staff retain the expertise of a natural gas consultant in this matter?
Yes, Mr. Jerome D. Mearsma of Exeter Associates assisted in the review of Chesapeake's application on both behalf of staff and the Division of the Public Advocate.
Are you familiar with Mr. Merswa's testimony, which was filed and is now Exhibit 6, filed on February 28th?
Yes, I am. His testimony focused primarily on his review of the company's gas procurement practices and policies.
Would you have any changes or modifications to his testimony?
No, there's no changes to make.
And are you prepared to adopt his testimony as your own on behalf of the commission staff?
Yes, I do.
Can you briefly explain to the commission what staff's findings were regarding this application and the exhibits?
Sure. During this year's review, staff's primary concern centered on a previously approved methodology being used to calculate the balancing charges that were assessed to transportation customers. Chesapeake is directly interconnected with only one interstate pipeline, which is Eastern Shore Natural Gas, which is who physically delivers the gas into Chesapeake's system. Recently, Eastern Shore implemented a new rate design structure. These changes are the primary reason behind why there's now a need to better refine Chesapeake's methodology of calculating the balancing charges for its transportation customers. As Mr. O'Brien stated, the company has agreed in its next GSR filing to utilize the approach that was described in Mr. Mearswa's testimony relating to that issue. Outside of that issue, staff generally found that the company's gas procurement practices and policies were reasonable. They continue to be in compliance with prior GSR settlement agreements. And as I discussed in my pre-filed testimony, they complied with the filing requirements needed to allow it to implement the proposed rates that are outlined in Title 26, Section 303 of the Delaware Code. I've also reviewed and verified the mathematical accuracy of the schedules and all the supporting calculations that were provided with the filing, and that methodology is also in compliance with the company's GSR tariff. So therefore, I'm able to conclude that the company has complied with and met the requirements that it needs in order to implement the proposed changes on a final basis.
Do you have anything else to add to your testimony here today about this application?
No, I do not.
All right, thank you. No further questions. He's available for cross-examination.
Ms. Iori?
No questions?
No questions.
Ms. Iori?
Thank you, Chair Winslow. The public advocate has nothing to add to everything that's already been said.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions?
Yes, just what rate impacts would change on the balancing and not retiring the propane facilities have on ratepayers? Do we know, has our consultant estimated this range, or?
Is that part of this rate case?
Well, it's in the testimony, Ms. Chairman.
Commissioner Gray, we did answer discovery regarding what those transportation balancing charges would look like under the proposal submitted by Mr. Mearswa. We don't have that in front of us right now, but we can certainly get it to you. The closing of the Queen Street propane air facility, we have not calculated the rate impact of that. As you know, it's only used during peak periods. Typically when pressure support is needed on the distribution system, or even if we start to get towards a design day, we need those to help supply gas to the customers. So there's not a direct impact on customer rates. We could certainly calculate what the difference is between using propane air facilities and pipeline capacity to meet supply, but it's not exactly one-to-one because those propane air facilities are used for other purposes. To answer your question, we don't have those numbers for you today.
All right,
I'm
that's
sorry.
fine, thank you. No further questions.
Move that we adopt order number 9218 as presented.
I second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Well,
Mr. Gregg?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I was raising question for just the witness who was there, but I do have a question for Mr. O'Brien. When I look at the summary of the percent rate increase, it indicates a 15.13% increase on the customer, just based on the numerics in the rate schedule. But if I calculate the difference in the two rates, I get a 25.1% increase in the rate. So when you indicate that the per year, the customer in a year's time on this average of 700 cubic, I guess that's 100 cubic feet, will experience an annual increase of approximately 15.13%. What is increasing 15.13%? Because it looks like the rate is increasing more.
Commissioner Gray, I will answer that, and if Mr. Evergam wants to correct me or provide any other detail, we'll go ahead and swear him in to give a more detailed answer. But what that generally reflects is that percentage we base on the GSR, you're correct, that if you look at that percentage and the increase and compare it to the existing GSR rate, that percentage is off, because that percentage we provide to compare to the overall rates on a customer's bill. So we include the distribution rate in that so that you can see a bill impact. So 15% is closer to what the bill impact would be. But it's a higher percentage if you look at it just as compared to the GSR rate itself, because the GSR is just one component of the bill.
Of the bill. Okay, that was an assumption that I was making as well. So that is an annual increase of the bill, not an annual increase of the rate.
Of that particular rate, correct.
All right, no further questions, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay, you have
No more questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We've had our public comment already. Director's comments.
Good afternoon, Chair Winzone, Commissioners. So the first item under Director's comments, DENREC was scheduled to provide an overview of the Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Plan today. However, last Friday, May 18th, testimony was submitted in PSC docket 171094 regarding Delmarva Power's application for approval of a plug-in vehicle program. Funding from the VW settlement was included in that testimony, and because of that, I felt it was inappropriate for DENREC to come before you today to discuss that, since that may be discussed before you as part of that docket. You have to answer any questions if you have any.
Yeah, I had requested, in fact, to get some insight as to what was happening with VW's settlement monies, and I'm preparing for a panel at the MAC group, which is the Regional Commissioners Meeting in June. But I completely understand that we don't want to compromise any information from any parties in future hearings. And so what I've requested is just put me on 5 bullet points to show that I know something about what Delaware is doing in this arena, but give me enough information, but not enough to compromise the hearing. All right?
Understood.
Thank you.
Secondly, I wanted to mention that there will be a regional transportation and climate listening session at the Chase Center in Wilmington on June 6th from 5 to 8 p.m. Delaware is part of the Transportation and Climate Initiative. That's a collaboration of state environmental, energy, and transportation agencies working together towards a cleaner, safer, and more reliable low-carbon transportation future. The purpose of the meeting is to engage public comment regarding clean transportation strategies. And I understand Commissioner Gray and Executive Director Barua will attend.
In view of the last commentary we had, should I sit in that audience or not? Would you look into that and send me a signal?
Yes, sir.
Or provide me some advice and counsel? Thanks.
Finally, wanted to mention that we'll have a hearing June 5th regarding regulation number 56, regarding the rules for implementing renewable energy portfolio standards and the cost caps. That'll be June 5th here, and our next meeting is June 5th at 1 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, appreciate it. We're adjourned.